What's up, TUMNAD lectures? In this video, we are going to be talking about the ganglia within the sympathetic nervous system. Previously, we talked about the motor fibers of the sympathetic nervous system, the preganglionic and then the postganglionic. Today, we want to look at how these motor fibers, how they come out from the spinal cord to go and innervate different structures, passing through a couple of different ganglia. Okay, that's going to be our topic of today, the ganglia of the sympathetic nervous system. But before that, what is a ganglia? A ganglia is going to be a collection of neuron cell bodies in the peripheral nervous system, okay? A collection of neuron cell bodies outside the central nervous system. That is a simple definition of a ganglia. So we want to see how these motor fibers of the sympathetic nervous system, how they're going to come out from the spinal cord, and then they pass through the different ganglia, and then they go and terminate in different structures of the body, okay? Now, this one here is going to be now our cross-section of the spinal cord. These are going to be the dorsal horns. These are going to be the ventral horns, dorsal horns, ventral horns. We have just extracted a very small section from the thoracolumbar region because the sympathetic outflow is going to be from T1 up to L2, thoracolumbar outflow. We talked about that, okay? Now, we see these dilated structures. These dilated structures are on the cross-section of the spinal cord. These guys are called the lateral horns, okay? They are called the lateral horns. And it is within the lateral horns that we are going to be finding our cell bodies of the preganglionic motor fibers of the sympathetic nervous system. That is something which is very important to note. We are going to be finding the cell bodies of the preganglionic motor fibers of the sympathetic nervous system. They are going to be coming out from here, okay? So now let us see when they come out from here, how are they going to be moving? Okay, so now, for example, you're going to be having the cell bodies of the preganglionic motor fibers located in the lateral horns. Okay, even also this side, you're also to be having them. So now they are going to be coming out now through the axis. Is going to be coming out through the ventral horn, and then through the ventral root. Okay, and then it becomes part of the spinal nerve. And then it takes these kind of divisions. You see these divisions we have, this is spinal nerve, then this is what we call the dorsal rami, and this is the ventral rami. Now, these kind of the motor fibers of the sympathetic nervous system are going to be taking what we call the ventral rami. Now, when they take this ventral rami, there is going to be this kind of tube, okay? So now these fibers are going to come and enter through this tube, okay? Now, how do we call this tube? This tube here is going to be what we call white rami communicans, and it's going to be connecting the ventral rami to this sac. How do we call this sac? And this sac is going to be having neuron cell bodies, as you are seeing. So this one qualifies to be a ganglia, okay? So now, and this one also is going to be a ganglia. Even this one here is going to be a ganglia, and they're going to be connected like a chain. For that reason, it can also be called a chain ganglia, okay? What we call a chain ganglia, or you may even call them paravertebral ganglia. Okay, so now we want to see these preganglionic motor fibers are coming through the white rami communicans. Now, when they reach into these ganglia, there are a lot of things that happens. You see now, for example, if it synapses with the cell body of this kind of the neuron. So now, if it synapses here, okay, if it synapses here, we are going to be having now the post-ganglionic motor fibers of the sympathetic nervous system coming out. Now, it comes out through this kind of tube, okay? It comes out through this kind of tube. Now, how do we call this tube? This tube, which is now coming off from this chain ganglia, and then comes to join back into what we call the ventral rami. This is what we call the gray rami communicants. Okay, the axon fibers which are going to be passing here, they are not going to be myelinated. Okay, that's what is called the gray rami communicants. Okay. So now, if these post-ganglionic motor fibers comes out and then goes to become part of the spinal nerve, okay, and then it comes out. It can go to these structures. It can go, the first one, it can go to what we call, it can go to this, the arrector pili muscles of the skin. It can even go to this, it can even go to the smooth muscles. It can even go to the glands. Okay, it can go to the arrector pili of the skin. It can go to the smooth muscles, which are the blood vessels. and then it can even go what we call the glands. Okay, so it can go to what we call arrector, pili. Okay, arrector pili. It can even go to the blood vessels. Okay, it can go to the blood vessels, or it can even go to the sweat glands. It can go to the glands and even all other glands. Okay, so now this kind of the postganglionic motor fibers are going to be coming out, and then they innervate these kind of these structures. So now these kind of these fibers, okay, these kind of these fibers, for the case of the arrector pili, this qualifies to be now what we call the pillomotor. Okay, the pillomotor fibers. And then these ones which are going to the blood vessels, they can just be called vasomotor. Okay, they can just be called vasomotor. And then these fibers which are going to the glands, they can just be called the pseudomotor. Okay, they can just be called the pseudomotor. And of course, these ones which are going to the arrector pili, they are going to cause this arrector pili muscle to contract, and then once it contracts, this hair is going to stand. Okay, we shall see the hair is going to stand. And of course, this kind of the vasomotor fibers going to the blood vessels, it can lead to what we call vasoconstriction, and in some extent, in some way, we are going to be seeing that they're going to be causing vasodilation. For example, when the sympathetic nervous system is activated, we need some of these blood vessels which are going to be supplying the skeletal muscles to slightly dilate, such that to increase more blood flow to the skeletal muscles. It is also another beautiful thing. Now, for the case of the sweat glands, now what we know is that the preganglionic motor fibers, they are going to be releasing acetylcholine to stimulate the postganglionic motor fibers. Now, the postganglionic motor fibers are supposed to release norepinephrine. But for the case of the sweat glands, it becomes a bit unique. It is also going to be releasing acetylcholine. This is something very, very important to note, okay? The postganglionic motor fibers, which are going to be innervating the sweat glands, they are releasing acetylcholine, not norepinephrine, okay? So now we have seen that on how it is moving. But again, we have these fibers. Now this is going to be now the preganglionic motor fibers. They're going to be coming out through the ventral horn. They come through the ventral root. They become part of the spinal nerve. And then they move. They enter through the white rami communicans. Now, sometimes they may not synapse within the chain ganglia. They may not synapse, and then they can come and synapse in this ganglia. You see this ganglia? This ganglia is going to be located in front of the vertebral column, in front of the aorta. So now this ganglia, it has a couple of names. It can be called prevertebral, vertebral ganglion. It can even be called collateral ganglion. It can even be called preaortic. Okay, so now this kind of the ganglia has a couple of names. Okay, so now when this kind of the preganglionic motor fibers of the sympathetic nervous system comes and then doesn't synapse in the chain ganglion, and then moves to this kind of prevertebral ganglion, and then the postganglionic motor fibers can just come out. Okay, you know, whenever these fibers just comes out of the ganglia, okay, this now becomes a splanchnic nerve. Okay, it becomes a splanchnic nerve, and this nerve can just go and supply very many parts of the viscera. Okay, of the visceral organs within the GIT, and even other structures. Okay, so now this is how this one can happen. But again, these preganglionic motor fibers, even when they reach here, they can even move up. They can start to move up, and then they move up, and then they move up. So now, if they just move up like this, okay, now they can just move out like this on their own. Okay, so now if they just move out like this without even synapsing here, okay. Now, this one here, it is going to be now still a preganglionic motor fiber. It is moving. It can even generally move and move and move and move. It goes to this structure, okay? It is still a preganglionic motor fiber of of the sympathetic nervous system goes and innervates what we call the adrenal medulla. Now, you see how it has moved? It has moved from all this kind of the ventral horn, ventral roots, part of spinal nerve. It has entered through what we call the white rami communicans. It has just moved up without synapsing. It has moved to the next ganglia, and it has come out. It can go even to what we call the adrenal medulla. You know, this fiber, this is still going to be a preganglionic motor fiber of the sympathetic nervous system. It is going to be releasing acetylcholine, okay? And when it releases acetylcholine to the adrenal medulla, now, the adrenal medulla is going to be having what you call the chromaffin cells. And these chromaffin cells, they are going to be modified postganglionic motor fibers. Okay? It is something which is very important to know. So now, what happens when they are stimulated? When they are stimulated, it can release epinephrine, or even can release what we call norepinephrine. Okay, so now these are some of the exceptions of the preganglionic motor fibers that are coming out of the spinal cord. They just move direct and then they terminate in what we call the adrenal medulla. It is also such another beautiful thing. Okay, so again, these fibers, the preganglionic motor fibers, they have just come out through the ventral horn. They have come because of the ventral root through the spinal nerve. They have entered through what we call the white rami communicans. They have now sometimes they may not synapse here, but instead they just move up again. Okay, they move up and then kind of synapse with this. And now after synapsing with this, it can start even to come out on its own. Okay, so now this kind of the postganglionic motor fibers can just come out on its own. You know, when these motor fibers comes out on its own, it becomes part of what we call the splanchnic nerve. Okay, it becomes what we call the splanchnic nerve. When it decides to come out on its own, okay, it is also such another beautiful thing. Okay, so now let us just have a very simple quick recap of how these fibers are going to be moving within this ganglia. We said that this is a cross-section of the spinal cord, and we have the dorsal horns, the ventral horns. We have the lateral horns. It is within the lateral horns where we are going to be having cell bodies of the motor fibers of the sympathetic nervous system. When this cell body gets stimulated, we are going to be seeing now the action coming out through the ventral horn, then through part of the ventral root, becomes part of the spinal nerve. It will move through the ventral rami and then enter through what we call the white rami communicans. Okay, now when it reaches here, it can synapse, and if it synapses here, now the postganglionic motor fibers of the sympathetic nervous system can come out and become part of the spinal nerve through the ventral rami, and can come and supply three parts. It can supply the arrector pili, causing contraction of it, leading into raising or standing of the hair. These are going to be the pillomotor fibers. They can even go to the blood vessels and call them vasoconstriction, and even also vasodilation, depending, like for example, whenever sympathetic nervous system is activated, we need more blood flow to the skeletal muscles. So those blood vessels supplying the skeletal muscles, they may need to dilate more a bit. Okay, so now these the fibers which are going to the blood vessels, we call them the vasomotor fibers. Okay, and for the case of the sweat glands, these are going to be called the pseudomotor fibers. Okay, and for the case of the sweat glands, we are going to be seeing the postganglionic motor fibers releasing acetylcholine, not epinephrine. Okay, no epinephrine, as we all know that the postganglionic motor fibers of the sympathetic nervous system will release no epinephrine. This is going to be now an exception. Okay, for the case of the sweat glands. Okay, and then again we said that these fibers can come out again, and they come inside here. They don't synapse, they instead move up. They move up still as preganglionic motor fibers. They reach the ganglia, and then they come out and they go to this structure. But of course, we're going to be entering inside on what we call the adrenal medulla. Okay, so now this is going to be now the preganglionic motor fibers. If we don't have the postganglionic motor fibers in this case, okay, it is all down, it is all down to still the preganglion motor fiber. It goes and releases acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is going to be stimulating these chromaffin cells, which will end up releasing epinephrine and norepinephrine. So now the chromaffin cells, they are going to be like more modified postganglionic motor fibers. Okay, so now this is going to be one of the examples what we call the intramural ganglion. Okay, intramural ganglion is just such another beautiful thing. Okay, and then we said that these fibers can move through the ventral root, part of the spinal nerve, ventral rami, enters here. They don't synapse, they just move through this tube and then they come and synapse with this ganglia. You see this ganglion, we said it's going to be the prevertebral ganglion, collateral, even pre-aortic, because so now it can synapse here and then the postganglion motor fibers comes out on its own as part of the splanchnic nerve. It can go and even innervate different structures within the viscera. Okay. So now we said that these ganglions, which are going to be in a chain, they are what we call the chain ganglia or sympathetic chain ganglia. Okay, and this ganglia here is what we call the prevertebral. It's going to be prevertebral ganglion. Okay, prevertebral ganglions. Okay. So now we said even also that we have the preganglion motor fibers which can come part of the spinal nerve, move through the ventral rami, enters through the white rami communicants, and then moves up and then goes to what we call the adrenal medulla. Okay. We again also see that these cell bodies, when they get activated, we have these fibers. They can come out through the ventral horn, ventral root, become part of the spinal nerve, come through, enter through what we call the white rami communicants. They may not synapse here and then just move to another level up, whereby if they can synapse on this ganglia and then comes out on its own. Okay, and when it comes out on its own, it's what we call a splanchnic nerve. Okay, these are such beautiful things which you have to know. Okay, so now in the next video we're going to be talking about the cervical ganglion part of the sympathetic nervous system. We need to see how these fibers come out of the spinal cord and they pass through the cervical ganglion, what we call the superior, the middle, and then the inferior, and then they go to innervate different structures. That's going to be our next video. Okay, thank you very much for watching, and if you think whatever I've talked is making sense, is adding to you, you're benefiting, please make sure you like the video, comment in the comment section, and subscribe. Thank you very much for watching. TUMNAD as always, until we meet next time.